All right, everybody, welcome back into Cherry Picking. Today's episode, we welcome an unbelievable guest, Jonny Lazarus, who's a host and an analyst for the NHL, also a part of the NHL betting team over at VSiN, does some work for the BR Open Ice as well. Whole bunch of other things. This guy's all over the map. Welcome to the program, Jonny. How you doing, man?
Unbelievable is very high praise. I actually am. I'm curious if you said Anadua was unbelievable. I'll have to chirp her about that one if she didn't get that title. But I'm pumped to be here. Obviously, Anna's a good friend of mine, so that's just like a good friendly chirp. But Ryan, you and I had a great time during the Stanley Cup Final in Vegas, and I got back from Vegas this morning, so catching up on rest a little bit. But I'm ready to rip, man. I'm excited for hockey, and it feels like it's right around the corner. So I'm
yeah,
hyped.
it definitely is. And I will say, I didn't give Anna that much. That much of a success into the guest intro. Went to school with her, had to give her a little bit, had to keep her a notch down, give her a notch down. But yeah, you were just in Vegas. Why don't you tell everyone kind of what was going on there and why you were there?
Yeah, so I was there with Bleacher Report for the NHL Player Media Tour, which was, super cool. My first time doing something like that. And for those who don't know, I've done like a series with BR Open Ice where I kind of do like a B-reel of some sort, but video where I skate a lap around the rink with a player and like kind of ask them like fun stuff, get to know them a little bit more on the personal level, not really, hockey focused questions. So it's super fun for me. Like I get to laugh and have a good time. But it was super cool. I interviewed like 11 different players. I won't, say too many names because I want it to be a little bit of a surprise, but I did post like, a picture with Sid and Jack Hughes. And those were two of like my personal favorites. But yeah, it was a great 2 days in Vegas. I was in the rink basically the entire day for both days. So I didn't get to do much of the Vegas fun activities, but nothing better. And yeah, it was an awesome time. And honestly, like so many of these NHL players are so cool when you get to hang out with them. And obviously, when you have them in the media car wash, they're like a little bit, in a rush trying to bounce around to all the different events they have to do. But when they take like 10 minutes or so to talk to you and just like, have that like guy to guy, kind of conversation, it was really eye opening and cool. So it was a really cool first time for me.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I'm sure some of the guys were dialed, just ready for the season to start. I'm sure all this media stuff is good for them at the beginning of the season. By the end of it, maybe they're a little tired of it, but definitely an exciting experience and glad you kind of got to enjoy that before the season starts. But today we're talking all things defensemen, getting prepared for this NHL season. So we're going to talk some of the top defense and then some of the breakout candidates, some sleepers that maybe people can look at for their fantasy hockey teams. But looking at the season ahead here, we have the top guys in like Cale Makar, Adam Fox, Roman Josi, Victor Hedman, and Rasmus Dahlin. So out of those five guys, and feel free to bring up someone else if maybe I missed them in the top five, but which guy out of there do you think will have the best season in the upcoming NHL season, and which do you kind of see them regressing at this point of their careers?
So the one guy that I actually want to bring into this conversation who could replace Dahlin, and no discredit to Dahlin, but Miro Heiskanen is a stud. And, he's a guy that I think real Norris potential this year. Put up 34 power play points last year, tied for Quinn Hughes for most amongst defensemen, had 73 points for the Stars. And Dallas this year, I think, is going to be unbelievable. They're, to me, a cup contender, an elite cup contender. But for, a year, I guess, to break out and regress, I think the obvious answer to break out again is Cale. I mean, he had 66 points last year in 60 games. If he doesn't get hurt, he probably wins the Norris. I know Carlson had an unbelievable season, 101 points, but Cale does everything, like all 200 feet of the ice. Carlson gets a little bit knocked for his defensive play, and Cale really is, the best overall defenseman in every facet of the game, right? Like there's nobody like that kid. So I think Cale this year could be a 100-point player. I think Colorado, the West still runs through them. Even though they lost in the first round last year to Seattle, like they're still the team to beat to me in the West. And you could argue Edmonton is up there as well in Vegas if they have a chance to repeat. But Colorado, as far as just like top to bottom skill, is just so elite. And I'm sure you would agree with that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at their top, especially on looking at their forwards, like that top line, it'll be interesting to see how Dre kind of plays into that thing playing with McKinnon again. But their defense are stacked. Obviously, you still have Devin Taves, you have Bowen Byram, Cale Makar, obviously you mentioned. So on the defensive side of things, like they're definitely set. See how like the rest of their depth forwards kind of come out this season. Heiskanen's a really interesting option as well. I think he's definitely a contender for the Calder this year. He's still so young too, which I think people kind of like don't really pay attention to because he's already been in the league for like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And you brought up kind of Erik Karlsson a little bit too. Is there any chance we see this guy with 100 points like this season again on this Pittsburgh team?
I mean, he might have 100 points in the power play alone. Like that power play is going to be stacked, right? But I want to get back to the regression though, because I didn't mention the player I think is going to regress, and
yeah, go for it.
Roman Josi to me, just because of where Dallas is right now, or not Dallas, excuse me, Nashville as an organization. Like they're in somewhat of like this rebuild, non-rebuild mode. It's actually funny. I was talking to Philip Forsberg at the media tour. He was like the nicest guy ever, by the way. Like sat with me on the bench for like 20 minutes, just like shot the shit, like him and I, like, you know, talking about everything. And he was telling me like how their organization's in like this spot where, you know, they're trying to change the culture and do have this sort of rebuild going, but like they brought in a guy like Ryan O'Reilly who can, you know, help win them games. They don't want to not be competitive, but they also don't want to knock the whole thing down, right? Because, you know, a couple of years ago, Forsberg and Duchesne put up 40 goals each. I know Duchesne's in Dallas now, but, you know, Nashville could be a team with Saros at the back end. Like they could sneak into a playoff spot. I don't think they will. I actually told Forsberg that I have a bet against them to not make the playoffs, which he got a good laugh at. I told him, I was like, I hope you get 50 goals, but don't make the playoffs.
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, Nashville to me is just a team that they're going to have a hard time scoring goals this year. So I think Josi, you know, in regard to that, will probably regress a bit. But what were we saying before?
in terms of just Erik Karlsson and how he'll do on this Pittsburgh team.
I mean, listen, Pittsburgh is a group like, you know, first time in 16 years, they don't make the playoffs last year. And I think they were like 1 point out. Obviously, everyone knows that Chicago upset, but like they're a team that can easily win the Met if they're at their best and they're healthy. Like Tristan Jarry, if he's a healthy goalie, he's good. And, you know, Pittsburgh obviously has a very strong top six. Like, you know, I would argue that their top six is almost up there with anyone else in the league. But health is the biggest thing, right? Because they're all getting older now. Malkin, Crosby, they're all in the back nine here. Letang as well. Gensel is going to miss some time to start the year off, so that's going to be a little bit of an iffy factor. But last year we were saying the same thing about Boston, right? They were missing Marchand and McAvoy at the start of the year, and everyone's like, "Oh, Boston won't make the playoffs." And then, you know, sure as shit, best year in like NHL history. So I would never count Pittsburgh out. I did give a prediction like a couple weeks ago for the Met that they'll finish like fifth, but you know, last year I thought they would actually win the Met. So, you know, predictions are obviously.
We don't know anything. We don't know anything really.
Yeah, my cup final last year was the Blues versus the Penguins. What a dumbass I am. But you know, I think with Karlsson in the mix, like they're obviously going to be a threat every night to score goals. So they're going to be better offensively. Defensively, are they better? Are they worse? It's hard to tell. But they're going to be fun to watch, man. Like what a group that is.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. I think the one thing with Pittsburgh like this year. They're going to score a ton of goals. Absolutely. Will it, you know, on defense, will it be the same? If you have Letang and Karlsson like playing together, if they do that, I don't really think that's probably their best. They have some like younger guys like that Pierre-Olivier Joseph. So I think we'll have a pretty good year this year. So interesting to see kind of how Pittsburgh will do in that Metropolitan. It's kind of crazy. You think they have a chance to win the Met. Your Rangers team's in there, but we'll get to the Rangers in a little bit. But looking at maybe just some guys who broke out last year in terms of defensemen, you know, a couple guys come to my mind in terms of like Brandon Montour, obviously had 73 points, was an absolute stud on the back end for the Panthers. Evan Bouchard, you know, playing on that first power play, hard to not get a lot of points in Edmonton there. And then Vince Dunn too, finished second on his team in points with 64. Are there any guys you see this year that could have like that same effect, same impact, and kind of break out for their squads this year?
Well, Evan Bouchard is like the really interesting one because he only put up 40 points last year and had 13 on the power play, and that power play was obviously like illegal. You know, the Oilers literally had like the best power play I think in the history of the NHL last year. Like I think they were 40% in the playoffs and I think 32 in the regular season. Like Bouchard should put up 80 points this year. I totally like in my mind, like he can double 40, and that's I don't think that's like a hot take because the Oilers power play is probably going to be first again in the NHL, right? Like who's stopping them? I think
no, especially in their division too. Like no.
Oh my God, unreal. And I think it was funny. I'm trying to remember who tweeted it. I think it was like Heat Daddy. Like he's actually a good friend of mine. And everyone knows who he is. He tweeted like, instead of a Super Bowl halftime show, can we just watch the Oilers in the power play for 20 minutes? Like this is so funny. I mean, they're so fun to watch. Like Connor Leon and Bouchard, like running that unit. Like how could they not? 13 points to me on the power play is an absurd stat that I didn't really put together till before this. So I think he'll double that at least. Like he's putting up at least 30, 35 power play points this year. As far as Montour goes, Florida was so banged up last year. Like I know he put up 73 points in the regular season, and you know, he's a stud of a player. Don't get me wrong. And he's a UMass guy. So I've always been on the Montour train, but I feel like Florida might have a down year just because of how beat up they were at the end of last year. It's so hard to, stay healthy. And we saw it happen to Colorado when they won the cup like this past year. They had so many injuries and stuff. So Florida, I'm not super high on this year. So Montour, I think, will regress a little bit just because of that. And then Vince Dunn, man, like, let's talk about Seattle because their first year, they were like bottom 5 power play in the NHL. Last year, they're top 5 power play in the NHL. I don't know what the hell happened in that locker room, but all of a sudden they can score goals. And, Vince Dunn's obviously the guy quarterbacking that PP, and he didn't really have so many power play points as well. I think he had 15. So I think this year, like, Matty Beniers obviously has another year under his belt. Jordan Eberle, pretty solid goal scorer. Borkstrand, nasty. Jared McCann, 40 goals last year. Like, this group can score goals. So I think Vince Dunn puts up 20-25 in the power play, and he could hit that 70-point mark. But those 3 guys, they're special, man. And, that's a thing right now. That's changed the most, I think, in the NHL. Like, a lot of people say it's the goaltending and their positioning, their padding, whatever you want to call it. But the NHL defensemen now, like, they are so insanely talented. And like, we talk about top 5, top 10, but it's so hard to break down that list because so many guys bring so many different facets of the game. Like, a guy we haven't even talked about yet is McAvoy, who to me is like, if I'm going to a playoff series, he might be the first guy that I want, over anyone else. So there's just so many elite defensemen in the NHL today, and it's so hard to like narrow it down.
Yeah, absolutely. And are there any guys this year that you could see like maybe having that breakout season like we saw with Vince Dunn last year? Like maybe guys who didn't have the opportunity this year, but might have an opportunity on like a better team or just like an elevated role. Are there any guys you're kind of looking at in that kind of light coming into this season?
So one guy that I'm super high on, and I'm honestly just high on this entire team, is Thomas Chabot and the Ottawa Senators. Like, I started saying it like 3 weeks ago, like, this group, they're making the playoffs. Like, I will die on that hill. Last year for me was Buffalo, and I really had faith till the end. But Ottawa, to me, their top 6 is nasty. And Chabot's going to be running the power play with Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, Claude Giroux, and Vladimir Tarasenko. Like, he's going to put up points. Last year, he only had 41. This year, I think he'll put up minimum 60. Chabot is one of the most elite skaters in the NHL. I think he's a underrated guy because Ottawa doesn't get like so much attention, but Brady Tkachuk to me is going to put them on the map this year. He's a guy I believe put up 40 goals last season, right? I think
maybe just under it or pretty close to it though.
Right there. Yeah, he was flirting with it. I'm 99% sure he had 40, but I could be wrong, so I don't want to claim that he did. But that guy is like the ultimate swag king. Like, he was another guy at the media tour that was just like embracing it all, like loving the media, loving the fans that were there. Like, this kid just brings out so much energy in everyone that's around him. So I think he not single-handedly, but he will be a big part as to why Ottawa does make the playoffs. And, I think Chabot's going to be a huge beneficiary of that.
Yeah. Looking at like that Ottawa team as well, like Jacob Chikrin too is probably going to be playing with Chabot. Like, he's going to have, I love him. He's been buried in Arizona's system for years. He's dealt with injuries, hasn't really played a full season. I think his highest point total is like 40 points as well. He'll probably be on that second power play with Jake Sanderson, who I think is also incredible. I think just everything is kind of coming together for this Ottawa team too. So, but looking at kind of another Eastern Conference team, like, I know you're obviously a huge Rangers fan. If you follow Johnny on Twitter, you would know that for sure.
Yeah,
I honestly
don't hide it.
really, I honestly really love like the Rangers coming into this year. Like, I love the coaching change to Peter Laviolette. I have nothing against Gallant, but I just think Laviolette can, like, we've seen him really activate defensemen in the past. Like, perfect example. Last year, obviously John Carlson was out, but he still got 38 points, almost 40 points out of Eric Gustafsson, who's like 31-year-old, a little bit past his prime, also on the Rangers now this year, in just 60 games. So, like, what's your overall expectation for the Rangers and then this decor as well? Because I think Igor has made this defensive unit maybe look a little bit better, at least like on paper, than they've actually
1,000%.
been. So how do you see like the change this year for this decor?
Well, before I say that, can you explain, is that Marty Brodeur behind you? You're talking about how you love the Rangers. Is that a Brodeur?
Oh, no. That's actually just a painting that my mom did a really long time ago. That's just always been, I'm at my home house in Montreal right now. My brother's wedding actually in 2 days. Congrats. So yeah, thank you. But yeah, no, not Marty Brodeur, but I guess it's fitting for this recording as well.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say you're loving the Rangers with the devil painting behind you, kind of like a double negative or whatever. But yeah, the Rangers decor. I mean, to me, like, Adam Fox, like, easily top 5. Who had the list without him in it? Like, there was it the NHL?
It might have been, but I'm not sure, but he
Yeah.
needs to be included in that list. He's a Norris winner, right? Like,
Yeah, he won a Norris and he's been nominated 2 out of 4 years in his career. Like, it's absurd. So Foxy, I think obviously, like, people can say the offense runs through Panarin and Mika and whatnot, but it all starts with Foxy in the back end, right? Like, no one, I would argue that nobody in the NHL breaks the puck out better than him. Like, maybe, you could say Kale and obviously some of these guys who are incredible skaters, but that first play that Foxy makes, like a head fake to a simple breakout pass tape to tape, like, I think he's number one at that. And then obviously the guy like Ryan Lindgren, who's just like a human, like literally like a bulletproof person. I don't even know how to explain him. The guy's an absolute warrior. And then here's the interesting part, right? Because Trouba, obviously is in that second pair, and he's obviously, he has that reputation that follows him of being this guy that's, a modern day Scott Stevens. But I really want to see Keandre Miller play with Braden Schneider. I think Schneider is like one of those younger guys who's like obviously on the rise. He's like a baby Trouba, what we call him in New York. And, he's going to be one of those go-to guys in his career for New York. And listen, like, I'm not going to confidently say the Rangers should put an $8 million defenseman on their third pair, who's the captain of the team also. But like Miller and Schneider to me just seem like an elite second pair defensive, maybe not elite. That could be a stretch, but a very solid second pairing. Because Keandre Miller, like, I know we're going to talk about him, right? Like he more than doubled his point total last season from the year before. He had 20 points in 21-22. Last year, 43 points and only 3 on the power play. So like this kid does it all at 5-on-5. If he gets power play time, he'll produce more. I think he'll quarterback the second unit this year under Laviolette, which will give him a little bit more, I think, of a point production total. I actually have a bet with Grinelli that Keandre puts up more points than Hampus Lindholm this year. And I
love that. I would take that bet 100%.
Yeah. I love that bet. A lot of guys disagree, but I think just where the Rangers are compared to what the Bruins are, it just makes more sense to me. But that's obviously with my bias, I think, a little bit. But yeah, then Gustafsson, obviously, and then Zach Jones, like, is another guy who can come and fill in too. Like the Rangers, their issue is breaking the puck out, I think. Like after Fox and Miller, they don't really have amazing defensemen that break the puck out. Trouba and Schneider are somewhat guilty of like, high glassing out. But Miller's skating ability and his overall length like allows him to get the puck out with ease, like in 3 strides. Foxy's vision, like I said, Lindgren isn't as pretty with the play, but he gets the puck out when he needs to. But to your point, like Igor definitely bails this group out a lot, right? But I think that's the advantage of having an elite goalie, right? Like you can I'm not saying it's good to like take your foot off the gas, but like when Igor Shesterkin's in net, like you can kind of like not back check as hard, like, let's call it what it is, like,
yeah. But I think one thing with Laviolette, like I think he could change maybe that a little bit this year. Like I think
we've seen it
in the past. Yeah,
he will.
I've seen it in the past with some of the other teams, like he's coached and obviously he has a really good pedigree behind him going into this year. But on like looking at Keandre Miller, like he was at I think he finished with like 43 points last season. Yeah. Is it crazy to say he could go for 70 this year? I don't think so.
Man, 70? I was gonna say minimum like 55. 70 that's wild.
Dude,
Foxy puts up 70. Come on, what are you talking about?
He had 70, but we've seen now it's crazy the NHL. Like we've seen Carlson up to 100, obviously. A lot of more defensemen like are getting like Vince Dunn, what did we say? He had like 64 points last year. Yeah. I know he's obviously not the lead man, but he's still going to be playing 22 minutes a game. Is that too much?
That's totally fair. But like the thing is, like he's not going to get more than 12 power play points. Like that's a good point. The Rangers' number 1 unit like stays out for like a minute and a half. Like that's the thing, like that's why he like I think 70 is like crazy. But I love it. I love
60 it. 60 is where I'll middle at. Okay.
We'll negotiate for 60. But also a guy that we haven't talked about, like the quietest 76-point year last year, Quinn Hughes. Like,
oh yeah, I know. Because Quinn Hughes was such a shithole last year.
Yeah, they were so bad. But Quinn is also one of the coolest guys. Like, I got to meet him a couple times now over the past couple years. Quinn is like, if Vancouver's good, like I just want to see his personality like come out because he is so chill. Like honestly, I love the kid. Like I really do. Jack too. Like those two are unbelievable. And I haven't met Luke, but Luke Hughes is another guy too. I think we're gonna get into it. Like the guys that can like break out this year that have more of a role. But yeah, back to the point. Keandre Miller, I'll I'll flirt with 60, 70.
Let's
no
flirt with
shot.
60.
Yeah, no
Okay,
shot.
let's flirt with 60, 70. I was getting
Yeah.
crazy. You know, I was thinking
Yeah.
about Marty Roeder behind me. I was going nuts. And yeah, let's talk about the last few things for this episode. Just some sleepers and even some of like the rookie defensemen that I think, you know, I think there's some really interesting choices this year that could have a bigger impact, especially for people who are looking to draft them in fantasy hockey. Like I have a couple sleepers in mind. Some of them are actually the rookies that it's hard to say like in the NHL, like rookie defenseman, like Luke Hughes is a rookie defenseman this year, but we saw he looked like a 3 years under his belt when he was playing in the playoffs last season, and even a little bit in the regular season too. So are there any guys that you think are like super sleepers to like really break out this year? Or even if you want to talk to the rookies, you could start there too.
Like point wise, as far as the rookies go, like not really. I just don't think they get the ice time typically that, these younger studs kind of get. A guy that we haven't talked about too, who had somewhat of a sophomore slump, would be like Moritz Seider. Obviously he won the Calder in Detroit, but Detroit's like such an interesting team, right? Because I think everyone thinks like they're this team on the rise, which they definitely like are, but I don't think they're there yet. Like some people are saying they're a playoff team this year. I would bet against it. I think Ottawa has a little bit more potential than Detroit right now, but like give it 2 years and we'll be talking about Detroit in the playoffs for sure. But Seider and like Raymond, those guys, we're going to stick to defensemen, but I think Seider put up like 5 goals last year, which was super disappointing after his rookie season. So he's a guy to look out for. Owen Power, another one. We talk about Buffalo, like Dahlin and Power are nasty. Power, I think, needs to have a little bit more of a shoot first mentality. I think he talked about it actually like on Chicklets this summer that he kind of was shy to shoot the puck last year. And that's something that like you gain with confidence and strength and overall experience, I think, as you progress in the league. So, he'll put up a couple more goals this year, I think, Owen Power in Buffalo. And then who do you have? Because I'm kind of blanking right. Brock Faber in Minnesota. I don't think he'll put up points, but he's a guy that will definitely have a big role in Minnesota. But yeah, who do you got?
I think there's some interesting options in Minnesota too. Like even Addison last year, like I think a lot of people kind of expected him to go off, and we didn't really see it. We saw it in spurts, but now Dumba's gone. I think they're really going to introduce some of these like younger guys that are coming up. So I definitely like the Faber pick. We talked about Jacob Chikrin. I kind of have him on this list as well. And then even some of the like, I don't think Brant Clark on that LA defensive unit, like I'm not that he's going to overtake Doughty for like their number one offensive defenseman, but they have a lot of guys that are kind of just like very good at handling the puck. Obviously they picked up Gavrikov last year, but I think they're deep. They're very deep. I think he can, maybe not right away, but if he could be like top four of their defensemen by the end of the season, by the time the playoffs come, because he started with the club last year and just didn't really find his role. He only had like a couple points, then went back to the OHL and dominated as well.
Mikey Anderson too in LA.
Mikey Anderson too. Yeah. But see that I think that's someone like Brant Clark, if he's paired up with Mikey Anderson a little bit more conservative, I would say maybe. And Brant Clark like has shown his offensive abilities, like whether it be in the World Juniors or in the OHL as well. Obviously NHL is a different league, but and then even he's a little bit older, but someone that is just flying under a lot of, like Justin Falk, I think still has a lot in the tank. And he's still playing a lot. He's still playing in that Blues defensive unit. That's obviously they have Colton Parayko. He's probably going to play with Torrey Krug again this year. He had 49 points and 50 points the last 2 seasons. Like a guy that I think people continue to sleep on, even though St. Louis, I don't think is going to be very good this year.
Still, are they not the most confusing team?
Dude, Jordan Bennington is the most confused. Like, he's interesting. He's such an interesting like scenario for me as like a goaltender. Obviously, goalies are so fucking weird, but like he's so up and down. I've never seen anything like it before.
But Ryan, like to that point, like think back to the 2022 playoffs. Like they're tied game 6 home ice like against the Avs. Like Helm obviously has that like late goal. Like, and then last year they just completely crumbled. Like I was so high on St. Louis. I thought Kyrou and Robert Thomas were like ready to rip. And Pavel Buchnevich, obviously, coming from the Rangers, can score goals. They were a very odd team last year. I think they can recover this year, but yeah, their decore's sick though. Like, how are they not figuring it out? And their power play, that's their biggest issue because that season their power play was like a top 5, and this past year they were like a little bit toward the bottom of the pack. But if they figure out their power play again, like, dude, Krug, Falk, those guys will put up points.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And then Just like some of the other rookies, like Luke Hughes, I think will obviously have a little bit of a bigger
Yeah.
role this year in New Jersey. They have a pretty deep decor as well. Like I think Dougie Hamilton will still play with Siegenthaler on that first unit, but then even some guys that are like maybe are like right on the cusp of making their NHL rosters, like that David Jiricek kid on Columbus. He played last year in Cleveland and was pretty solid. Is Babcock going to let like these young guys come up and play? I don't know. He usually sticks to his veterans, and they've picked up a decent amount of guys this year. And then you mentioned Mort Seider, but Simon Edvinsson, I think is also pretty interesting. He has a shoulder injury right now.
Where's he from?
So I don't think he'll.
I'm not familiar with him.
He's from Sweden. They drafted him, I think, 2 years ago. So I don't know if he'll crack the roster this year in Detroit, but I think also an option that people can kind of keep their eyes on. Is there anyone else?
What's that meme that? Like? I'm not familiar with his game. You seen that meme or whatever?
I'm not sure.
I forgot I posted, but that's a good one. There's no one like off the top of my head that I can really think of.
I'm trying to think of like the top 50 guys. Like you mentioned, like I think the Heiskanen point is really good and someone that people should definitely consider like picking even higher than. I'd pick him higher than Carlson.
Yeah. I know the Flyers signed like Oliver Bonk, their first round pick, but I don't know if he'll like is anyone going to pay attention to Philly? Like I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, as long as Torts is still there, I don't know how you can really.
Oh, I mean,
actually, one guy I wanted to ask you about this year is Dursey because he was good in LA but now he's in Arizona. Like, do you think it's just going to go like this for him, or maybe he gets even more opportunity plays on that first pair with like Dumba or something like that?
Yeah, they're an interesting one, right? Like they're the trendy team, I think, this summer because they've gotten better for sure on paper, and they have that like advantage of Mold Arena where they like have succeeded. Clayton Keller, obviously a breakout year last year, he's sick, but like I think a lot of people are saying they could sneakily make the playoffs. I don't think they will, but it's a fun thing to talk about. Dursey and Dumba, like I think Dumba needs that like fresh start where Dursey doesn't. So maybe they give Dumba the opportunity at first just to like kind of get his game back a little bit. But yeah, I could see Dursey like, how many he put up last year in LA?
Oof. I think he was just around 40.
It was around 40, right? Let me see. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. But also like, dude, like a guy who gets no respect, Noah Dobson. Like he's nasty too.
Actually, yeah. He's so good. Yeah, very good point. He had 38 Jersey last year. But yeah, Dobson. You want to talk about Dobson quickly before we get out of here?
I mean, Islander fans like literally try to argue that he's like up there with Foxy, which I don't agree with. But this kid, his body is so interesting, right? Like he's got that like tall, lanky to him, like somewhat of a Miller looking fit, but his skill and just his overall like perception of the game. Like he's another guy that breaks out the puck so well. He's a great power play quarterback, but their power play is just so god awful. Like if the Islanders can figure out their PP though, like Dobson can put up 60, 65, but like that's a huge if because for whatever reason, like I don't think I've been to like maybe 10 NHL arenas. I don't think I've ever heard more of the shoot it like when they're on the power play than in like UBS Arena, Nassau Coliseum. Like Islander fans are so impatient with that power play and rightfully so because they've struggled for so many years. Matt Barzal, who I absolutely love, just will do 10 different cutbacks on the half wall and like fucking just watch himself stick handle for 30 seconds before making a pass. And that's not a trip because I love Barzal. Like he's one of my favorite guys to watch, but like the power play is just him stick handling, like looking for a lane and he doesn't really shoot. So like, they got to figure that out. But Dobson, he's sick. He's fun to watch. But then, yeah, off the top of my head, like, trying to think of other guys that maybe stand out. And like, I'm looking at this list and, maybe Provorov has somewhat of a, resurgence in Columbus and Werenski, like being healthy is huge.
That's the biggest thing. Werenski playing a full season, like an impossible challenge.
Like that power play could be sick to watch too, right? Like if they're healthy, Werenski, Fantilli should be on it, Line, Gaudreau, and is it Marchenko maybe in that fifth spot?
Yeah. You're right.
Am I right? Let me just double check that. I don't know if that doesn't sound right.
Unless they have Boone Jenner in there, which I would be pretty surprised with at this point.
I'm just gonna check Daily Faceoff, see what they have it projected as. It is, Marchenko. Sick one for me.
He's nasty.
Yeah, he's sick. But yeah, man, like I think this year is gonna be like you always have those top heavy teams. Yeah, it's gonna be sick. And there's so much parity now in the league, right? Like, because like last year Vegas doesn't even make the playoffs. This year they go on and win the cup and dominate. So like, it's so hit or miss. I feel like in today's NHL.
Yeah, definitely. Before we close the show, I gotta ask, who's your top pick for the the Stanley? Who do you think is gonna win the Stanley Cup this year?
I mean, I'm gonna sound stupid, but like, it's the Oilers for me. I think just
Okay.
Connor and Leon, like, you can never bet on the Oilers. I feel like that's like rule number one with hockey. But Connor and Leon, like, just being around them, they seem like they just want to win. Like, Eichel's this happy-go-lucky guy now that he's got one. Like, Nathan McKinnon, he's way more smiley. Like, Connor and Leon just want to win. And if they don't do it in the next, like, 2 years, like, or 3 years, when's McDavid's contract up? It's like 4 years, I think. How many more?
Probably 4 years.
Something around that.
Like that long deal a couple of years ago. So yeah, it has to be like
this
that.
Guy just wants to win. Like, he doesn't care about anything else besides winning. So for whatever reason, I just have that little inkling that the Oilers get it done. Because like the last 2 years, they're knocked out by the eventual Stanley Cup champion, right? So 2 years ago it's Colorado, they get swept, and last year it's Vegas. And Vegas, they could have easily won that series. So I don't know, man. I think Edmonton, they're the ones that
all right,
have the pit in my stomach, I guess.
All right. Well, there you go. Mine's I'm going with Eastern Conference. So we could have this could be the Stanley Cup final for all we know, but I've picked them last year. I'm going right back to them, and it's the Carolina Hurricanes. Just with who they picked up. I know, but who they picked up especially in the Met. I'm sure you probably don't love this team. But yeah, just who they picked up on D, like with Orlov, they brought D'Angelo back. I do really like the Bunting signing, to be honest. They need more guys that can like be gritty in the playoffs because they really didn't have too much of that last year. So I think the additions that they did, and then just keeping like the same, like Svechnikov comes back, they have like a 3-headed monster at goalie. Like if anything happens to old bag Ranta, they just have Kochetkov in the back to kind of pick up the slack. So I think they're just a really well-rounded group, a group that's played a lot together, and will kind of finally get it done. But I could definitely see an Oilers Hurricane Stanley Cup final, which I think
that's a repeat of 06.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. The Hurricanes are just so not sexy, dude. Like, that's just
no, they're not. Yeah, they're not. So but they get it done.
Yeah, they do. But they don't.
Yeah, true. Not in the playoffs. Not in the playoffs.
Yeah.
All right, man. Really appreciate you coming on today, Johnny. I'm sure would love to have you on again at some point during the season for sure. Thank you guys for tuning in today. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.